Hello and welcome to today's KDP University's At Home with Nana Malone. I'm Trisha, and for the past 4.5 years, I've moved around Amazon's books team, learning the business so I can share it with authors. Well, let's talk a little bit about Nana. So Nana Malone is a Wall Street Journal and USA Today best-selling author. She writes sexy, feel-good romance and loves all things romance and adventure. And that love started with a tattered romantic suspense she borrowed from her cousin. It was a sultry summer afternoon in Ghana, and Nana was a precious 13. She's been in love with kick butt heroines ever since. And with her overactive imagination and channeling her inner Buffy, it was only a matter of time before she started creating her own characters. Well, welcome, Nana. We are absolutely thrilled to have you joining us today.
Good morning. How are you? Hello.
I'm doing well. So exciting to have the opportunity to talk to you today.
Yeah, I'm super excited. This should be really fun.
Absolutely. So let's get started by talking a little bit about when you decided that being an author was your calling.
Well, it started way back when, many jobs ago, and I read Helen Fielding's Bridget Jones's Diary. I was working in New York at the time in public relations, and it was the book of the summer. Everybody had it on the train. Everyone had it everywhere you turned. The little orange banner, the eyes popping up, and I was like, what is this book? So I went to Borders, oh, rest in peace Borders, and picked up the book, and from the first page I said, I can do this. And it had never really occurred to me to be an author before, because I thought authors wrote a different way and didn't sound like me. And of course I didn't know that was called voice at the time.
Mhm.
But with Bridget Jones's Diary, I was like, no, she sounds like me. She sounds like how I talk with my friends. These sound like my adventures. This She sounds like me.
Mhm.
And of course, knowing nothing about conflict, motivation, and goal, dragged out my laptop and started tapping away at my very first book, which was terrible for many reasons, is not published. But that's how the journey started for me, really, with that one book.
So have you revised that book at all? Have you
I, I a couple of years ago, I went back to it to see if it was all salvageable, and the answer is no. It took 8 years to write that book, and I even shopped it, I will tell you, which was oof. Um, but no, it's not like, knowing what I know, even what I knew 10 years, no, 5 years ago, I think was the last time I tried to be like, oh, maybe. No, it's not. Not salvageable, sadly.
so we talk it up as a learning experience, right?
Yes, I sold my next one though, so that first book was really necessary.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So what genre? I know it's romance, but any specific type of romance that you like writing in?
Contemporary romance. I oscillate between sort of a chick lit, uh, kind of rom com feel, to
Mhm.
between that and sort of like a new adult, sexier contemp adult. They're
Mhm.
all my people are like in that cusp before 30 kind of range. Um, and no matter what I do, I ingest suspense. I cannot help it. I'm like, this is great, but it'd be really awesome if someone was shooting at them. So contemporary romance, and then I kind of feel out where I'm going from there. But usually they're funny and snarky, and
Mhm.
you'll feel really good when you finish the book. You'll be happy, and it'll be fun. But there's going to be an adventure in there. So we'll just say contemporary.
Awesome. Awesome. So I wonder why you feel driven to have people shooting at each other. It's just interesting.
Well, I actually know this answer. I didn't
Okay.
before, maybe 6 months ago. Becca Sim has a course called oh God, now I've forgotten the course name. forget, I'll remember the course name like when I don't need it. But the
Right.
idea is oh, strengths for authors. Oh, thank God. But strengths for authors, and you take this test that really talks about what your core strengths are and really how to utilize them. And the point is you're already utilizing them. They are your
Uh-huh.
strengths. Um, but also like really understanding why you have those strengths and like what that means for your books. So for me, I have high consistency. Now, I thought because I was a former project manager in another life, and I really like things on a schedule and like they have to follow
Hmm.
and routines, and not really. Consistency is also how people are treated. So I have a high sense of justice, and want to treat people the same across the board unless they do something, it's like everything's even unless they should prove like, wow, they're awesome or, oh, wow, they're not. So I like to treat people evenly. And so, of course, human beings aren't even. And so when
Right.
I conceive someone as bad according to my compass, I want them to get their comeuppance. And so that's why I do that. Which is a lot of suspense, a lot of the bad guy getting what he deserves, or not even the bad guy, just someone who treated someone wrongly, actually
Hmm.
getting what they deserve. So basically, I am karma.
There you go.
So that's why
Awesome.
yeah, I code high inconsistency, and when it's not there, I just tweak a little.
There you
So
go.
that's why I do it. And I didn't know that. I was like, oh, because if there isn't any of that when I'm writing, I'm very bored. I can
Uh-huh.
obviously do plenty of things that don't have that and enjoy them and love them for what they are. But if I'm writing, it has to have justice for all.
There you go. Well, good. Um, so speaking of that and your character building, who's your favorite character from your books? I know it's like asking you who's your favorite child, but still, if
you
you had
know,
to pick one.
oh God, I always hate this question. If I
Uh-huh.
had to pick one, the ones that are closest to me, by the way, they're all me. But the one
Okay.
that is closest to me, I think probably Abby Nate from um, London Royal London Soul, because that was very specifically about a part of my life, obviously
Mm.
fictionalized and not at all real. But when she moves to London for reasons, and she just kind of sheds her whole life and goes to school in London and has this whole like set of adventures, and that mimics my life a lot. And she's also from Ghana, like I am, and so I think probably she's my favorite in terms
Uh-huh.
of that's my biggest connection. And then also my latest heroine, Livy from the See No Evil trilogy. She
Mhm.
is also Ghanaian, and she has this like again the sense of justice. She wants to do the right thing always.
Mhm.
And if people don't like aren't following those rules, she gets real twitchy. So she's probably most similar to me, so probably why she's my favorite. Like I just want to scoop those two up and be like, it's okay, don't worry, love will come in the end. I'm just gonna torture you. It's fine, you're fine.
I just have to torture you for a bit and then you'll get your happy ending.
Yeah, so those are probably the ones that are strongest, probably because they're the most similar to me.
Nice. So you're obviously a self-published author. We haven't talked much about that. So let's touch on that a little bit. What's something you wish people understood about self-publishing?
Um, I wish people understood that it's not just the writing. And people were really honest with themselves. Like even people who don't know anything about books, they're like, oh, so you just get to write all day. And I'm like, I wish, because clearly I'm a writer, so that's the favorite part of the job. But
Mhm.
I cannot I have zero design skills, so I cannot design my own covers. And there's a lot of project management skills. So thankfully, that was a previous job. But you are like people are like, oh, you set your own deadline. And I'm like, no, you set a deadline, yes, but once you set that deadline, you have people waiting on you. You have designers waiting on
Mhm.
you, editors waiting on you, proofreaders waiting on you. Everyone is waiting on you. And
Mhm.
I read Shonda Rhimes' book, The Year of Yes, and she talks about TV, and it's like every 8 days. Every 8 days, the train is coming, whether you're ready or not. Every 8 days, every 8 days, every 8 days. And that's how I look at my production line. Like that, for me, I do not move deadlines. I do not move production lines for any reason because I've set the expectations, and
Mhm.
that train is coming.
Yeah.
And so you better be ready. And so that's the one thing I would hope new people learn, especially, and
Mhm.
people who also, are just like, oh, it's fun, you can just do whatever you want. I'm like, no, it is, but there's this whole other side, and that may or may not be your strength.
Mhm. So let's talk about that just a little bit. Can you talk about your day, your schedule that you have? Because I'm sure you have to have a pretty rigorous schedule in order to meet those deadlines.
Yes. Well, before COVID, it was a whole different kind of schedule. So
Uh-huh.
before COVID, it was wake up early, usually by 6,
Mm.
and work out, or depending on like what scheduling is in that morning, who's taking my daughter to school, that kind of thing. But work
Mhm.
out, and as soon as I work out, I mean, even before I really let myself take a shower, pardon me, I dictate my books. Thanks to a shoulder injury years ago. But even before I let myself take a shower, I drag out the phone and record a quick scene,
Mhm.
before I do anything else, because I want to make sure that A, when I'm working out as part of, no one likes to work out, but I like to make sure that it's done first. But also, if
Right.
I write first thing in the morning, for me, that means that it's going to be a good writing day because my brain is already locked into thinking and is juiced. Like, so the night before, I will just make little bullet notes about what I plan to write the next day. And
Mhm.
then right away, I try and get a scene down, or just even a half scene, just even a few hundred words, so that
Mhm.
I've done some. And then obviously through the day, I'm a plotter. So I have a very handy tool called Pacemaker, which is amazing. Pacemaker.press, I think it is. And
Uh-huh.
it keeps me on track for how many scenes I'm supposed to do for the day. And I already know like where the train's supposed to take me for that day, what the
Mhm.
next stop is. Some days you hit that. I mean, for me, words are paramount. So they're the first thing. Like, I will do nothing else. I won't answer
Mhm.
email. I won't do anything else. No, nothing gets done unless words are done.
Mhm.
Unless something's urgent. Like if it's released and like the website's down or something, like I will
Right.
obviously deal with that. But in COVID, everyone's schedules are different because people are
Right.
home and no longer have silence. So I'm trying to be a little bit kinder to myself. The schedule remains the same. The books are on the map. And so for me, I've had to get a little more creative, working around my daughter being home, working around my husband being home, working around not having silence to dictate. And I'm in California, but the first few weeks, 6 weeks of COVID, it was gray, it was wet, it was cold. So dictate going outside, 'cause sometimes I'll go outside and dictate, even though there's like, people mowing lawns, and there's kind of noise. But then I
Mhm.
would just go into the car. But that schedule was pushed back. So I would try and wake up early, but then it's like I woke it up early, and then before I can even start to dictate, someone's downstairs, like wanting breakfast, and it's like I'm not a short order cook. So I had to adjust and change. Um, and then obviously with everything going on in the world, it's been stressful. So I'm trying to
Mhm.
pay attention to what my mind is saying. So recently I've been realizing that maybe getting admin stuff done first thing in the morning, and this is stuff that needs to happen. And
Mhm.
then I'm finding that my brain's more like clicked in around 4 p.m. And then all
Oh,
of a sudden
okay.
words are flowing easier, and I'm like, maybe I don't try and kill myself, because sometimes in the morning, it's right now it's like, oh, come on, it's just, you're just like mind tired already. But
Yeah.
weirdly around 4, it's like after I've dealt with some things, then I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. So nothing is set in stone, especially now.
Right.
But that's become the new pattern. But either way, the words get done before bed. No
Well,
one's
good.
finished until the words are done.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you're talking about taking care of yourself and making that a priority. I think that that's a challenge for everybody right now, but a definite necessity.
Absolutely. I mean, it's difficult. I mean, under normal
Mhm.
circumstances, I'm not the best at it. I let the stress build. My husband will tell you I'm the worst. He's like, go to bed. I'm like, but one more just thing. But now, especially because everyone's home. So it's like my neuroses aren't just contained to me and the dog.
Right.
So I must take care of myself so it doesn't spill over to the small one and to the husband. So it's like, okay, it's sort of forcing you to like take care of yourself.
Well, good, good. Now, you mentioned a little bit about your team. Can
Mhm.
we talk about that? Kind of what
Yeah.
kind of team do you have?
Whew, so many. It's weird how it balloons into all like these are your people and you need a lot of people.
Hmm.
So from the on the production end, obviously I have an editor that's been with me for a few years and we're a great team. And she'll be the first one to be like, this is what are you doing? This is not working. She's lovely and so kind, but she also is like she knows me, so she knows I could take a hit. And so she's like, nah, change it. And then obviously I have proofreaders that
Hmm.
come back. So I do a couple runs with her. We do proofreaders. On the production end, I've got a cover designers, sort of like a slate of them that you sort of cycle through. And you're sometimes you're like, oh, I want to try so and so because you hear so and so is great. But
Hmm.
it's weird. Cover designers are people that like everyone's always looking for. Everyone's like, oh, who's doing these covers? And everyone's always looking. Um, but right now, I love my current cover designer. She's so just amazing. So that's really on production. Those are the people that are going to make the book look the way that it's going to look. I mean, I have someone that can do like especially the print formatting.
Hmm.
But I generally do the ebook formatting myself because I have Vellum, which is a tool, and because I have so many books, it's really important to update your back matter. Like if nothing else, update your back matter every time you release a book. And you can hire people to do that for you, but it's going to cost you
Hmm.
money. And I have a lot of books, so I'm not going to pay that money. I can just do it myself, which is not ideal, mind you, but
Hmm.
everyone has to make this. Some people pay. Everyone has to make those decisions themselves. For me, I have too many books. Sometimes in a series. I mean, imagine if
Hmm.
it's $30 a hit and you have 10 books in a series.
Yep.
for, for format, for like a quick update to be like, and this is the new book.
Right.
I just I have to do that myself. So that's on the production end, and then I have a publicist. I have an assistant, PA, who is fantastic. Runs my group, runs my page. The publicist is amazing. Not just blog tours, but really like helping me really foster those vendor relationships. She's amazing. And let's see, I'm forgetting someone. Yes, oh, my newsletter person, because I can and have done newsletters myself. But
Hmm.
the really important thing is to, when you look at all the things that you're doing, to really pay attention to your pain points and things that you seem to never have time to do,
Hmm.
which is always newsletters. They like on my 80/20 list, there's this idea, the Pareto Principle, that 20% of your work goes into 80% of the output. And 80%
Hmm.
of the work only goes to 20% of the output. Newsletters always get slotted to the 80. And so I'm like, how do I hand this off? So I hired someone who's fantastic and great. And she
Okay.
knows all about like really taking care of your newsletter list, making sure not necessarily the call, but if you've got, block sends or whatever, she gets rid of those. She cleans the list to make sure it's tight. Gets rid of duplicates. People sign up a lot. They'll sign up for the same newsletters, I swear, with different emails. Um, that happens a lot. So really that's the team. Some people like go even further and have like full on like and I've had a business manager before and he was amazing, but it's like you look at how much things are costing you and you make decisions.
Hmm.
Um, but some people have like house managers and like all this like so that they can do nothing but right. I am not so fortunate yet. But I mean, it all depends. Your team blooms as you need it, and then you condense it as you don't need it.
Now, I'm assuming you didn't start with all those people helping out.
No, I started as a one woman team. This is it. I did everything. I did
Uh-huh.
everything for years. And it's
Hmm.
only really been in the last 5 years that I've had um, quite a big a team. I mean, I started when I started self-publishing, I started with editors. That was the first
Mhm.
thing, and I started with cover designers. I think I got a pre-made, um, but those are kind of a must. Do not trust yourself to edit. You don't know. You think you know, but you don't. Doesn't matter if you're an English teacher. I know people are gonna be like, oh, but no, no, you need someone who is not you or your mom looking at your words. That's vital.
Yeah, exactly. Amazing advice. And it's the same thing I stress. If you're going to
Yes,
spend money, that's where you spend your money on your editors and your cover designers.
yeah. That's if you have $100, that's. I hesitate to choose between the two, but if you have $100, I almost say the cover, but oh, I want to say edits. It's hard. It's a hard choice. But if you have $100, people will stop at a cover before they can see the words. The problem is if you lose them,
Hmm.
they'll never come back. So I don't know. It's a
Yep.
hard one. It's a hard one. But
It's a toss up. Yep.
yeah, it's a hard one. I mean, go
Hmm.
50-50.
There
Call
you
a friend
go.
to edit. Someone who will be
Yeah.
honest. That's the important piece.
Yeah. So when did you realize that you could become a full-time author? I know that you talked about writing that first book that you put away, but when,
I mean, it was interesting. It was my third book, because I'd sold my first one, and then the second one, thanks to a very good friend that I'd met in the RWA online boards, and she was she still is a great mentor and a friend now. She when I wrote that first book and I was busy shopping it because I was convinced I was going to be rich off of this book. She looked at me and said, "That's really cute. Write another one." And I was like, "But I have this." And so that's when I wrote my first book and eventually sold that. And then afterwards, it was really kind of at the advent of like, KDP. Like you started to hear like, oh, people were talking about it. And I was like, oh, what is this? And I read ebooks. They were like ebook publishers like way back
Mhm,
in
mhm,
the early aughts. And so like you would get like the PDF file and you could read it on your computer. It was weird. But really at the advent of the KDP 2009, 2010, so like I'd written my first book and I was in the process of selling it and it came out in 2010. And so KDP had been around a little bit, but she'd already jumped into indie and she was like, you need to get into indie. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll see. And there was a call for a book from one of these ebook publishers, and they had
mhm,
declined. And I was like, oh, and I had this book. And so I was like, oh, maybe I'll just self-publish it. So I did the
mhm.
whole, found an editor, this whole thing. And I made more money on that book in like a day than I did when I got no advance because back then, especially. But like for my first royalty check, which was $57, and I was like, oh, wow, so rich. And so it really was. And so my third book, which was more in line with the first book that I wrote, um,
Mhm.
that was like my first like proper check from Amazon. Like had zeros in it, and I was like, wow. And it was really the first time I was like, oh my god, I could do this. And I was working full time at the time as a project manager. I got paid well.
Mhm,
It was one of those things that was like, but the job it was very stressful, and
mhm.
I was not a happy camper. My husband looks at me and he's like, well, you're making money, quit. And I was like, oh, I need a plan. I can't just quit. But really seeing that I could make that kind of money, I knew I had to A, learn to be faster,
Mhm,
and then B, like trying to figure out marketing. But that was really
mhm,
when I knew that I could leave and be full time. And yeah, that was like after book three. It was like this is the
mhm.
plan to. I mean, it was always a plan, but like it was a near plan and not just one day. It was actionable at that point.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about marketing. You mentioned that
Mhm.
you had to learn marketing. Can you talk a little bit about that? Kind of what were your steps and then how's that changed from then to now?
Yeah, I'm still not good at it. I think it's something that you always learn. But, especially back then, I really knew nothing. I knew what I loved to read, and I knew that I enjoyed characters like that. So I think marketing has a lot. It starts with you as your brand and what you want
Mhm,
to write. Um, and there's people who have pulled it off and can just write whatever, and their voice is what people are drawn to.
mhm,
Um, those are unicorns. I got some very important advice from Bella Andre, like way back when at an RWA conference. She was giving a speech and she was like, write in a series, write in a series, write in a series. Stay in that series until you have at least 5 books. Do not leave that series. Get to know your characters, live in their world, write in a series. And
mhm.
but at that point, I had not done that. Had not. And I'd written kind of all over the place, and I was like, I don't know why I don't have more readers. So I think consistency is key, really. And people are
Mhm,
like, oh, but that's not marketing. I was like, actually, kind of is. Consistency is key, letting people know what to expect from you. Um, Once you establish that, I think you can have a lot more leeway and a lot more kind of fun, as people say, and get to do your own thing more often.
mhm,
But there are people who succeeded without doing that. But this is by and large the breadth of people. Consistency is key. Really know your voice. Really know what you actually enjoy writing. Do not chase market trends. Don't do it. Don't do it. You'll be miserable. I promise you'll be miserable. Please listen.
yep.
No one's gonna listen. I know they're all gonna be like, but I've heard the next thing, that this is the next hot thing. I'm like, but do you love it?
I know I get asked that all the time. I
I'm
get
like,
asked it all the time. I say the same thing.
I'm like, do you read it? I mean, do you remember when Step Brother was hot? Like Step Brother was hot. It was the thing, and it seemingly
Mhm,
you could hit a list. And so I was like, I'm gonna write. Sure, I can do that. Listen, I did it, but in a totally me way.
right.
It was. I mean, the book did fine and did well, but it was not the kind. It was because it wasn't like what people wanted with Step Brother. They wanted a bad boy, which is really, really what they wanted was alpha male. Step like
Mhm,
really what like. So, but I was like, no, 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 I'm just gonna do it my way. And he was still like not super alpha and not even really her stepbrother. It was like her foster brother. Like it was. I was trying to write to trend. I was like, yeah. And then I was like, no, 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 but I'm still going to do it this way. And I was like, it still would have been great had I just decided to do my own thing. So, like, really
mhm,
do what you love, because trying to write to market and trend is going to make do your head in. And I've written
mhm,
for publishers when they've asked me specifically for something, and I've been like, oh, okay. And those were torturous and painful. Don't do it. So really, but you must understand the market and understand what's selling. If you are KU, for example, know that the covers look different than if you are wide.
mhm,
Um, that's a huge thing. It's a huge big deal because you will look at a cover and sometimes you don't even understand what it is, but you'll be like
mhm,
that. Your gut will tell you that's a KU cover and that's a wide cover. But the thing is, remember, hard and fast rules are also sometimes you can break them, but only after
mhm,
you understand them can you decide to break them how you like. But you must understand. Really, it's marketing. It's your own brand. It's really understanding in terms of selling. You're selling you. You're selling your voice. It's not so much about the story, but learn how to write a blurb. Learn. Dear God, learn things like how much space you have in the Amazon in terms of your blurb, like what
mhm.
you really get to see before people have to click see more, because that's the only space you get to sell your book.
Yep.
Listen when people tell you that, like, it's confusing. I don't really know what this book is. And people have said that to me for years because I was pushing the wrong thing.
Mhm,
And sometimes, and then don't also try and be like others. Like I remember I had a newsletter person tell me, just ask me about one of my books. And I was like, oh yeah, he's an undercover bodyguard, she's a hacker, da 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 da. And she was like, I would read the heck out of that book. But what you got here is like enemies to lovers, and it sounds like everybody else. She's like, code that, of course, but like put the pieces that make you you. Don't
mhm,
water it down so that you look like everybody else, because the problem is you will look like everybody else and no one has a
mhm,
reason to stop at your book. So the thing that makes you you, wave that freak flag in a concise blurb so that people
yeah.
really know what's happening in the story, and they can really, like, if someone's not into bodyguards and hackers,
Mhm,
great, they can move on. but code that, because those who are and like are really going to be your readers will be like, that sounds awesome. And then you can get into the generic enemies to lovers. So really understand like who you are. Um, covers. Oh my God, covers. Everyone gets caught up in like, oh, and the Facebook and the ads. And yes, that's important. But I think that's less important than really knowing who you are, what your brand is, and being consistent with that. Like, I think that that's really where the marketing comes in, and really understanding in your genre, whatever that may be, what codes as that kind of book. Like I
Hmm.
had someone do alien romance, and it was like the cover was just font, and I was like, man, you missed, like, if that looks sci-fi, but it doesn't say alien romance. Just,
Right.
and so like understand, and really, because you don't want a reader to stop at your cover and go, that's not for me, and
Hmm.
then because you want them to stop and go, ooh, and then flip, quote unquote, flip it over and read the back, right? um and that's the key. Pretend you're in a bookstore, make them stop, make them read, capture their attention, and then make them open a page. Those are your jobs, and how you do that, wherever you may do that. Whether it's Facebook, yes, you can do things like takeovers and things, but that's a lot of noise. The basics
Hmm.
are make sure your voice is consistent, make sure also the next best way to market your book is to write another one. Because people want more of the same. I hate to
Yep.
say it, but the same, but different. Like
Hmm.
I've written Royals for the last 2 years, which has been great. I love the Royals. People love the Royals. Readers love the Royals, which thank you. But also when I transitioned into Big Ben, he's not exactly a royal, but he's a lord. And he turned up in the Royals book, so people are like, oh yes, I do know him. I've met him before. And it's an
Hmm.
easy leap, and it's sort of the same. And there's still intrigue and all those things that were in the Royals. So it still carries on. So it's the same, but different. So that I could also be like, oh, yes, I'm doing something different at last. So you really want to understand consistency. I mean, yes, like if you write contemporary romance and you love it, and then you're like, I want to write an alien romance. Uh, awesome. Great. How many books do you have out? Have you established a reader base? Have you
Hmm.
really established yourself before you think about this? Or have you written one book, got bored, and are like, but now aliens? Those are the questions you need to
Yeah.
ask yourself. That's the basic marketing. Sure, we could talk ads and book club and
Right.
all these, but those are ancillary, and other people can talk about them a lot better than I can. But really, consistency, your brand, your voice, that's the important piece. And write another book, because you
Good.
can't sell what you
All
don't have.
And those are super, super great. That's super great advice. And I'm going to shamelessly plug something else for just a second. So if you
Yes.
want more information about how to make sure that your description, that small part of your description or your subtitle, all of that works together, check out our Discovering Metadata webinar. We do it live every few weeks, but it's recorded as well. But we talk all about that. So
Yep.
I'm 100% agree that that's your building block. That's where you start.
Yep.
So thank you
Yeah.
for saying that. I
Well,
appreciate
I
it.
mean, it's hard. Sometimes you don't. I mean, I had to be reminded. Like, keep in mind, like, I've been doing this for 10 years, and I still had to be reminded. I wrote a great blurb, and it was awesome. And people were like, oh my God, this blurb's so dope. But, like, you could only see, like, 'cause I had done it, I did a line, and then there were, like, all these spaces. So all you could see was that one line, which was a great line, but still, they had to click see more. And I was like, oh. And so, like, I had to, like, fix it, and
Mhm.
just even watch your spacing. Like, just, it's like, look, you're learning the alphabet again, but you, in this career, you learn over and over and over and over and over again. And then you look at someone and you're like, oh, teach me how you're doing X. And then you relearn and you're like, how do I incorporate that? Because you don't want to just copy what someone's doing. You want to make it yours, because we are all learning
Mhm.
from each other. So like, you're making it yours and you're like, oh yeah, okay, then I can do this with that information. But I had to
Mhm.
relearn that, and I was like, it's like 101. But then you
It's a
relearn it.
constant. It's constant. You constantly learning new stuff. And as the technology changes, then you have to adjust again.
Exactly.
Totally understand that. So tell me about when you first reached the USA Today bestseller list. What was that feeling like?
It's funny, I didn't know. I was at home alone. My husband had taken our daughter out. God, she was little then, like super little, like
Mhm.
2, 3 something. And I was at home alone, and I just, back in the day when I was on Twitter. I mean, I'm still there, but I'm not really. Words. If I'm gonna write words, it's not gonna be for free. Let me
Right.
just say that right now. But someone on Twitter was like, "Yeah, congratulations, to Nana Malone for hitting, the USA Today list." And they're like, "Well, it's great to see a woman of color and hit it with a rom com. That's amazing." And I was like, "What is
Mhm.
she talking about?" I had no idea. Um, and shows you like I didn't know what I didn't know.
Right.
No
Right.
idea. And sure enough, I was like, I clicked the link, and there was my book. I was like, ah! And there was much screaming. And then I had no idea who to call. And I also had no idea what to do. I was like,
Mhm.
what do I do now? Like I didn't know. But I knew it was important, and I knew it was a big deal. But I just
Mhm.
like it finally I called that mentor I was telling you about, and I was like, Misty, I hate that. She was like, "Oh, so then they were screaming together, and then my husband came home, and I was like, I hit a list. He's like, I don't know what that means, but sure, let's get ice cream. that that was, I mean, it was pure elation because had never, I didn't even, it was, remember, this is early days. Let's see,
Right.
2012 is when Sexy and Stilettos came out.
Uh-huh.
And the list, 2013, 13, 14, it's been a minute, sorry for my brain. But I mean, and so it didn't come out, didn't hit a list on release week, something like that. I think it was like posted book club or something along those lines. But it was this amazing kind of elation because I was like, oh, one day I'll hit these lists. One day. And I mean, of course, I love goals. I love goal setting. But remember, you do not USA Today you can control because that's numbers. But you also don't
Mhm.
control who else sells lots of books as well. So, but New York Times you don't control because that's a curated list. So making that a goal
Right.
is a silly goal. It's a great wish, but you do not control that because you can do everything right and not hit it and then be in your sads. You don't want that. But
Mhm.
USA Today, it's a numbers thing. So you can hit it. You can set that as a goal. I just like when goal setting, I'm like, make sure it's attainable and you have control over how it's attainable because goals like NYT that aren't attainable are hard on the heart. You don't want that.
Oh, well, that's good advice, making sure you're focusing on things that you have some control over.
Yes.
Um, Now, you mentioned this a minute ago, and I see you have books behind you.
Mhm.
Your See No Evil trilogy is being
Yes.
released in April.
Yes.
So now, let's be clear. These books have already been released as single books, correct? And
Yes.
what you're doing is you're selling them together as a trilogy. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Well, yes. So book one, Big Band, came out in April. Thanks to all who bought it amidst pandemic. Because like I was like, my publicists were like, "Are we still gonna release?" And I was like, "Yeah, the deadline's a deadline. We're going out." Thank you for anyone who bought it in this pandemic. The second book, The Benefactor, came out in June. And the third book is going to be released in August. So it's a trilogy. I I listen to Bella Andre when she said write in a series. I do listen to Miss Bella. But for me, it's what I love these idea of these cliffhanger books. I mean, a lot of people are now like, I hate cliffhangers, but they keep reading. Um, you can hate them all you want, but look at it like television shows
Mhm.
now. Any television show that has high drama or whatever, every TV show ends on a cliffhanger because the key is, especially when it's weekly episodic, you must come back.
Mhm.
So how do they get
Mhm.
you to come back? They leave you on a cliffhanger. Now I know people are so spoiled. They're like, I have to binge. You can binge too in August when For Her Benefit comes out. But the idea is that I love it's the way it forces me to tell the story. It forces that tight, you have no wasted space.
Mhm,
And if you're doing more than one book to tell a couple of story, there had better be story to tell.
mhm,
Otherwise, you're up a creek with no paddle. Like you can't just be like, oh, of course, I'm just gonna do it and then drag it. No one wants that middle book if it's boring. Like no one,
mhm,
like things have to happen. Secrets need to be revealed. And then that last book, especially for trilogy, had better be like rip roaring, like nonstop, like
mhm.
crazy things are happening as the payoff. So hopefully I've done that. I think I've done that. My editor said I did that. So, but
Good.
yeah, no, I mean, I love writing in worlds, which is surprising to me because I thought I'd be bored.
Mhm,
So it's part of my larger London Lords world, and anyone who's read my royals has met the London Lords before. And people have been curious about them. They're like, about this cousin character. Who is he? Um, and there, if you love Gentlemen Thieves, if you love secret societies, if you love office romance, which is how it starts, kind of funny. But how I like to categorize it is office romance meets Ocean's 11. There's a
mhm,
heist in it, and it's fun. And like I said, the cliffhangers are a way, like for anyone who's like, oh, I hate them, think of it as a new way of telling a story. I mean, I've written standalones most of my career. I have more standalones than I have cliffhangers. And I love it because you're like, oh, and then I am done, and that was such a tasty treat, and ta-da, finished.
mhm.
Or you can, and it happened by accident. I mean, honestly, the very first cliffhanger I really wrote as a solo project, I was getting to the part that was the big black moment, and I was like, oh, here we are. And, I had, enough to finish out. And then I was like, I read it and I was like, ooh, but this spot right here, if I did cliffhangers, this would be one hell of a cliffhanger. And then it wouldn't leave me alone. And then I realized if I did clip it there, that set that, like, close out transition needed to be a whole dang book, which it
Mhm.
was not planned. And I was like, and then I had to make the decision, do I have enough story to tell? And I was like, yeah, actually, I could tell a whole thing about how they resolve this
Mhm.
cliffhanger situation. So that's what I did. And I was like, ooh, ooh. But it forced me to be a better writer. I know a lot of readers sometimes will, don't look at your reviews, don't do that. They're like, I wish you felt confident enough about your writing. I was like, actually, I feel confident enough about it that I can cliffhanger. That's really,
Mhm.
because that's where the confidence comes in. It's like, no, I can clip it. I can bring you back. I can do it. So, so that's why I love this trilogy. It's been really, really fun so far. Last book is, I hope I gave the promise, the premise has been delivered. So I'm excited about that.
Well, awesome. So we've got a lot of questions that are coming in. So I thought maybe we'd spend the last 15 minutes taking some of the questions that have come in from people who are joining us.
Awesome.
So Sherry wants to know, what advice do you have for writing humor?
For writing humor. Are you funny? That's a key question. If you are that friend that's always got that, like, that zing, that, and you cannot help your, like, you have to put it in there.
Talk about a cliffhanger. Um,
The key is humor comes in the dialogue, really. It's that kind of tight banter. If you in life hard and difficult and find other ways to inject the humor, you can do that situationally and that sort of thing. But really the best humor, at least for me, like my favorite kind of humor is when it's like really kind of friends groups. Cause like no matter who you are with your friends and your family, like those just like little like zingers come in all like people's families are funny, and like found family is funny. And the things you can tease each other about are funny. And think about those conversations and write out the conversations like it's you and your siblings, like
Mhm.
it's never mean spirited, but it's always just like a little poke. So like really write out
Yep.
that dialogue and practice dialogue, because I think that's where most humor comes in, is from the dialogue. Or you could be like, I mean, Julia Kent is amazing. She's just, I I wonder if she's just crazy because her books are like such slapstick, like hilarity. I mean, usually it's banter, but then just situationally, it's like, what? What?
Yeah.
How did you even conceive of this scenario? So some people are really good like that, but take things in real life that have happened to you that you were like, you get stuck in a car, like, like I have had to one time break into my own home and gotten caught on a window by my skirt. So there's my butt hanging out. And I put that situation in a book. At the time, it was very stressful, not funny at all.
Right.
But my husband laughed his behind off when I told him. So then I was like, note to self, use that for later. So
There you
you
go.
things that have happened to you, but also just dialogue and banter.
Nice. Um, so we have a question. How long on average does it take to finish one manuscript?
For me, I am pretty fast. On average, about 2 weeks to finish first draft, and about 2 weeks to a month to do edits and polishes.
Mhm.
It depends on if I'm only working on one thing at a time. I can do a manuscript, a first draft in a week, but I know most people cannot. Um, it's also not ideal because it means that I am under stress and pressure and something went really wrong somewhere in the planning. But yeah, it's about 2 weeks to draft, and that's like 70 to 85K, which is where no matter what I say, I'm gonna be like, oh, I'm gonna write 60, 75 to 85K is what comes out. So that's about it. Yeah, about 2 weeks.
Okay. CL wants to know, for Audible books,
Yes.
is it better to have male reading for female or female reading for male? Do you think that there's a preference?
I don't think so. I will say for audiobooks, you want to go with the voice that people respond to, not necessarily the voice that you respond to.
Hmm.
I think that that's key. You want someone who can do both, and there are amazing professionals in the industry who are actors who know what to do. But you want to listen to their version of like if it's a male narrator, like they're super famous ones, can they do
Hmm.
it? Does it sound okay? Um, and then there's some people who've only used female narrators. I've also done that. It works fine. I personally prefer to have the two narrators, but like you will get the male doing a female part in that, unless it's a duet narration. But you will get that, and you
Hmm.
will get the other way. Just make sure that to you it sounds good, and then these are also people that people respond to as well. And you can test that out. You can be like, here's an audio sample I think of someone I might use, and see how your readers respond to that person.
Hmm. Good. Um, So we also have a question about you've mentioned a few times the support that you've received
Mhm.
from other authors. So how did you find those other authors? You've mentioned RWA a couple of times, and for those joining us, RWA is Romance Writers of America. Can you talk a little bit about where you find that support network of other authors?
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, it's gonna sound ridiculous, but make some friends. I mean, honestly, eh, that's really it. Back in the early days, Romance Writers America, they had an online chapter, and I joined because I was like, I need to learn how to get my act together. I need to learn why this book isn't working. And I honestly would just read posts and respond to people. And one woman, Misty Evans, she's fantastic. She had the agent at the time that I thought was my dream agent. I've since evolved. Um, and I was like, oh my gosh, is she really great to work with? How do you like? I just asked a question, and then she started talking to me, and then I was reading her stuff, and she wrote romantic suspense, and I was like, oh my god, this is so good. And she offered to read my um, chapters that I had, and she was so encouraging. I mean, she was like, oh my god, I'm blown away. And I was like, man, you lied so hard. She goes, no, but I was. She goes, I was responding to your voice. She's like, were there things that obviously you fixed and tightened and whatever over the years? She's like, yeah, but I responded to your voice. But
Hmm.
I mean, I made a friend. I mean, and so that's really what it is. Like, foster your connections. I know most of us, it doesn't seem that way as I'm talking. I am terribly introverted. I start to sweat when I meet new people. I mean, it's not cute. I mean, it's like not like the cute, like, oh, I'm just glistening. It's like patches of sweat. It's not comfortable, but that's part of the
Mhm.
business. And when you make friends and making real friends, real connections, not, oh, like that person can get me something, because there's a lot of that too. Um, but real friends, like, you find that you pay it forward for each other so often that
Mhm.
when opportunities come up or there's an anthology, someone calls you and it's like, hey, you want to be this anthology, because they're your friend, or you write similarly, or whatever the
Mhm.
case is. So honestly, make a friend. Several.
That's really good advice. Yeah. My favorite is when I've been at several different author conferences, and my favorite is starting up conversations in elevators. You meet so many new people that
So
way.
many people. It's like, hi, who are you? What do you write? I mean, it's hard. I do sweat. I
Yes.
mean, I'll get off the elevator like, oh, need a new shirt. But you did it and you didn't die. I promise. You're not going to die. I promise.
Yep. And most people are standing there feeling the exact same way because I
Exactly.
am also a painful introvert. So it's like that was a life goal for me at one time is start a conversation with a stranger in an elevator.
Yes. I mean, it's difficult, but you'd be amazed. And most people are so kind and so
Yes.
nice, and also terrified of
Yes.
meeting someone new. So then you have something in common immediately, and then you made a new friend.
Mhm. Exactly. Exactly. All right. Um, let's see. Let's grab a couple more.
Okay.
Oh, okay, I know. You mentioned KU and wide.
Mhm,
So let's talk about that just a little bit. First of all, KU, which is
mhm.
KDP Select for authors, is also
Yes.
Kindle Unlimited, and wide is you're publishing all over the place
Yeah.
for ebook. Can
Mhm.
you talk a little bit about your philosophy on that? Are you enrolled in Kindle Unlimited or KDP Select?
I Yeah, no. I personally believe, this is my belief. Growing up, my parents are from Ghana, West Africa, and growing up, like, it was always like my father always just says, like, he's like, do you have enough money? Like, whenever I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this extra thing. So to me, I always believe that, like, I like to be available in all the places that people can possibly find me. It's why I do audio. It's why I do print books. Just, I want to give people access on an opportunity to find me wherever they may choose to. I never wanted to be like, oh, I've never heard of her, which still happens all the time. But I never wanted to be, people are like, oh, I don't, where do I find you? And I'm like, well, I'm available everywhere. But I do have some books in KDP Select. So for me, as part of my strategy, I will rotate books in and out, see what works better, see what kind of covers work better on each side. You do, if you are on KDP Select, you do get an algorithm boost, so people see you more in the Amazon store. But I also have learned that when I'm wide and see I get a book bub, you get things like book bubs more readily and easily when you are wide. It's hard
Mhm.
to get a book from KDP Select on BookBub. It does happen. It is a rarity. But after a BookBub, I find that I get a huge boost on the other vendors. And so, but that's also me having built those vendor relationships and being on those stores for a long time and having built up a readership. And then people are like, oh, yes, I'm going to get that book on sale over there. And that's really the idea. So that's my philosophy. Is like, I want people to be able to go somewhere and be like, who in the world is Nana Malone? And then be able to, like, find me wherever they, so that I don't want people to take an extra step to find me.
Mhm.
Basically, I don't want them to be like, oh my god, I've seen her, and they go to their choice and they don't find me and then have to go look somewhere else because people lose interest. That's how it is. So that's my personal philosophy. But I do understand. Listen, covers that work in KU do not necessarily work as well wide, and vice versa. So you have to pay attention to those things if you decide that you're like, I'm going all NKU. Great. If you have a bunch of object covers, you're going to have a harder time. That's just, pay attention to what works on each side if you're deciding to go all one way or all the other, which I
Mhm.
personally don't like. I'm like, hey, I'm going to try it all, be available in any way, because I don't want someone in KU to be like, well, I can't get her. I only have KU. I only read KU. I can't get her books. Well, you can read some of my books. Here's 6 of them. I have 85, so I can do that. But
Yeah.
I and there, I will say, back to consistency, I think that generally speaking, if you are newer, you want to build one way or the other. So make a choice and stick to that at least
Mhm.
until really you're like at the 10 mark, and then you can play more, or you have more than two series, you can play a little bit more. But before that happens, I'd say be consistent, pick one way
Mhm.
or the other, and then grow that way. And then you can experiment.
Right.
'Cause I think otherwise it confuses readers.
I think that's really good advice. Absolutely. So CL wants to know, what challenges do you have as a Black woman writing about white characters?
Um, well, white is seen as default in our society. So, right now, I will say that sometimes it's difficult, because like emotionally, I'm just like, don't want to do it, but I'm on a deadline. But the thing is, my characters look like my friends and family group. I have a very international group of family and friends, and that's how I frame my stories. But my
Mhm.
mission statement when I first started was I wanted to write front of the store, and we're talking borders here, Barnes and Noble, front of the store books, because I didn't understand that books, when they're at the front of the store, they were bought and placed there. But
Mhm.
front of the store kind of books that featured women who looked like me. Like that was point blank. I Not at the back of the store where I have to climb three shelves to even be able to see it, let alone reach them to pull them down without help. But I wanted to write those books that I love to read, that were happy, full of joy, romance, that were seated right there at the front of the bookstore. But they just happened to
Mhm.
have women who look like me. And so when I started, that's always in my mission statement. I've written 85 books, over half feature women of color, and it's not just Black women, it's Latinx women, Asian women, Middle Eastern women, and I've made that my mission statement. Now they're all mixed up. I've written Asian men, like white men, like it just, I mix up the crew, and so I basically mark those people as people that would be my friends and in my family, and are, they do what they need to do, which is how I make that work for me. Sometimes it's difficult given the current climate of the world. Sometimes I do not want to do it, but that's my job. But like I said, I write the world that I live in and keep
Mhm.
my mission statement at my core always. Because everyone's like, oh, like you should have more Black men on your covers. And I was like, okay, yes. And, I would love to. At the same time, my core mission is for women who look like me, because it's primarily women who read romance. And I think it's important for us women to see ourselves in books. So, like a young girl like me who is reading romance at 13, who should not be reading romance at 13, but who was, can see herself and be like, oh, I too am deserving of love and happily ever after. So that's why I focused on brown women. And I have a program called the Brown Nipple Challenge over on social media, and
Mhm.
where I challenge people to decolonize their bookshelves, especially in romance reading, where I offer up books that I've read and loved, and we have book club chats about them. Because there's some kind of stigma. A lot of people come with their own biases, and they're like, oh, but I've never, where do I even find these books? And they're there and available. Um,
Mhm.
but that's how I do it, and that's how I write my world and my friends and my family. And yes, I put my people in my books. Don't tell all of them. Sometimes some of them won't be happy, but that's how I do it, and that's how I
Mhm.
manage to market and work in that world.
Good. That's an amazing story, and I think that very powerful for right now, and being true to that, true to who you are and to your core mission statement really
Yeah,
says a lot, and your success shows that it works.
thank you. Um, it doesn't always work the way I want it to, but I because that's my mission and that's what's the most important thing to me. I don't stray from it. Um, Sometimes my characters are white. Some of my friends are white. That's how my world goes. Sometimes people are going to have brown nipples, and it's going to be okay. But that's what I committed to. That's who I am.
Mhm.
I wasn't going to hide. I know some authors have don't disclose their race and are never their pictures are never available, and I recognize that sometimes you can be more successful that way, but I chose not to do that, and that's my choice, and hopefully it works and it resonates with readers.
Good. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. I
Of
appreciate that.
course. Of course.
Well, on that note, we are at time. So I'm glad we got that question in.
Yay, I'm
But I want to say thank you so very much for joining us this morning, Nana. The
glad.
hour flew by. I mean,
Yes,
seriously, I'm like, really? It's
I could
time?
I could do this all day. Thank you so much for having me. It's been such an honor and so much fun. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And for all of those that joined us, we greatly appreciate it. You can check out our help pages. And again, you'll receive a follow-up email tomorrow. And in that email, there will be a URL for our help pages. So you can check out the recording, or you can go over to our YouTube channel, because I usually post on the YouTube channel before we send out the email. But either way, check us out. And as always, happy publishing.
Bye, guys. Thank you so much.